Welcome to the Chase Down podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. The Cleveland Cavaliers bounce back and end their losing streak with a resounding win over Toronto Raptors. No Carter Rodriguez on the podcast today. I am happy to announce that he is a dad times two. I'll leave it up to him to share his details at the appropriate time, but could not be happier for the Rodriguez family. But joining me today, filling in, is my good buddy and friend of the podcast, Spencer Davies' basketball news and the Keeping It 94 podcast. Spencer, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. And congrats, Carter. We're happy for you, buddy.
Super happy for him. And I'm almost as happy that the Cleveland Cavaliers finally gave the Toronto Raptors what they deserve. Because, you know, it's been a frustrating season for that head-to-head matchup. And for the Cavs to come out and handle them as dominantly as they did was certainly refreshing. Sometimes shooting luck goes the other direction. We haven't had a lot of that this year, but certainly got that against Toronto. And especially coming off that loss to Atlanta, it was a real palate cleanser. What stood out to you, Spencer, as you watch the Cavs take care of business?
Well, I think it was kind of exercising their demons twofold. You know, you're coming off of the 3-game skid, starting off the All-Star break the way they have. Just obviously the bad taste in their mouth. They competed really well against the Nuggets. Let's face it. I mean, that was just some things happened down the stretch that didn't go their way, and the Nuggets are an amazing offensive team with a lot of weapons. So that one you can accept. The one in Atlanta was troubling just because of how well Bucks were able to just kind of outrun them, outcompete them, get the loose balls and all that other stuff. But the way they responded to this 3-game skid against the Raptors was they wanted to set the tone early. And that's what Darius Garland did. That's what Donovan Mitchell did. And honestly, it was the core four. That was the story of the night. I mean, Jared Allen and Darius Garland working in the pocket, Evan Mobley continuing to just diversify his offensive game and at the same time hold up that defensive end of the floor, as we know he's done all season long, crashing the boards. It was all about them, I think, on Sunday. As you saw in the box score, very top heavy. But Darius Garland, I think, he didn't have the nicest of that lines. That was obviously Donovan Mitchell with his big time performance, 35 points. But I mean, Darius Garland going out there getting 18 points, 11 assists, but putting 0 on the board and a plus 39 in that game. That's pretty big stuff right there.
It's pretty awesome. I call these games blueprint games. We've had a couple season where all four just put up ridiculous numbers that look like what you would get if you were trying to prioritize them in a video game or something like that. But for all four of them to shoot over 50% from the floor, as you mentioned, Mitchell, 35 points, 4 assists, 3 steals. Garland, 18, 11, and 2. Mobley, 18, 9, 4. Allen, 23 and 11. Like, that is so much fun. And it's just another one of those kind of proof of concept games that these four really work well together. We've seen it all season. I just checked today on Cleaning the Glass. The net rating with all four of them on court is plus 7.3, which would be best in the league. Like, for a starting lineup this young to perform this well is a real feather in the cap. And I kind of had a light bulb moment, Spencer, where I was thinking about kind of some of the negativity and doubt that come in during a losing streak. And I'm like, well, I don't really get that upset because I know the Cavs can play better than they did at Atlanta, right? Like, I know that they're a better team than that. I don't really get worried about it. Then I realized on the flip side, I can see why fans would get annoyed at a performance like Atlanta because they know that they can play better than that. I'm like, the same reason why I feel good and confident is probably part of the reason why people get frustrated, because going into the Atlanta game, and we said it on the podcast prior to the weekend, there was a real chance that you could lose all these games, right? Like the second night of a back-to-back, Atlanta, Denver's obviously a very good team. I agree with your assessment that they played really well, but Atlanta wasn't what I expected, where you either rest disadvantage and maybe have some tired legs. It was a lack of focus and execution. So for the Cavs to bounce back from that so quickly against a team giving them a lot of trouble in Toronto, that was encouraging to me.
That was quite encouraging. And I think, there's another circumstance there with Atlanta as well. They had interim head coach Joe Prunty, and then they had announced or there'd been reported that Quinn Snyder got hired as their head coach. They obviously introduced him today, but I mean,
You always win that game after you fire a coach.
You
every
always
time.
do. There's like some unwritten rule in basketball that just always has to happen. But going back to your point, the way they responded, I think, is what makes them as good as they are, because they have to go through these things. Donovan Mitchell mentioned it, man. Like, the regular season is important, just regardless of what people talk about. It's when you do build those habits. It's when you do kind of ramp up before this stretch here going into the postseason. They've got less than 20 games to go, man. Like, it's pretty crazy that we're already here. But they have to, kind of bring that consistency. And that's something that pretty much every NBA team in the league is still searching for. I think besides a handful of teams, like maybe the Bucks, because they were on that winning streak. You obviously have Denver, who's just in town. Philly's been doing good, but, Boston's obviously at the top there too. But I feel like a lot of the outside of that top 3, top 4 haven't had that consistency. So it obviously drives people mad, but at the same time, you see the potential and that just kind of makes you salivate a little bit, because you're like, wow, if they can do this, especially against a team that gave them trouble the first 3 times they met them, just like you said, then, the possibilities are really high with this group. There's still some questions, and I'm sure we're going to get into that, but I think overall, big picture-wise, they look good.
They really do, and one of the reasons I encourage people to always check the box score, one, it really matters because it's been such a tight race in the NBA, and just checking in on what all these teams are doing, it's important. It's important when you care about the standings and positioning, but it's also important too just to see what other teams are going through, right? Like, there's not a single team in the league that has a fan base that isn't counting 5 to 10 losses that shouldn't have occurred, right? That just games that frustrate them the same way we get frustrated looking back at the Warriors game. Like Boston, for example, they went to Orlando and they played Orlando twice. They lost both of those games. Miami lost twice recently to Charlotte while they're in a tight Eastern Conference race, right? Like, fan bases are kicking themselves over that. And it was funny because I was listening to Carmen and Lima recently, and one of the callers brought up, Cavs aren't actually that young. They're like, you always hear the excuse about the Cavs being young, but if you look at their average age, I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, that's propped up by Kevin Love at the time, Robin Lopez, Raul Neto, Ricky Rubio. And it was really kind of solidified for me when a user in our Discord brought this up today. The average age of the starting 5 of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, Boston's at 28, Milwaukee's at 30, Philly's at 30, and the Cavs are at 23. Like, there is a little bit of a difference there. And we saw inconsistency even with the LeBron team, right? But to me, it's really fascinating because you go from 3 games in 4 nights to start the post-All-Star break to 2 games this week, where there's actually probably going to be a chance to rest and have practices and prepare for such an important stretch. And to me, it's really fascinating because you look at these next 5 games and they're going to be really, really important when it comes to determining where the Cavs end up in the East.
Especially because, I mean, they're going to be taking on a hot team in New York, first of all. I don't know if you see the Knicks. They're really taking it to Boston right now. I know obviously the game's going on, but like, that's a big team to play. The Nets, they've had their kind of their lumps here and there, but
the Chicago game was a bit of a lump for sure.
I was gonna say they've had their lumps, but they are still a new team that's kind of energized by, obviously Mikal Bridges is there. You got Cam Johnson trying to prove something. So these are teams that you still can't take lightly. And again, like I said with the Knicks, they're just really ripping through right now. But that I think is a good way to kind of reset a little bit. Like you said, they have some off days, some games in between. And, JB Bickerstaff actually brought this up because someone asked about, the rotations and how they handle it, because obviously the core 4 guys are playing a lot. And again, those questions that we're probably going to get to is the other guys, right? But those off days are where they're going to have to get their treatment, where they're going to have to really use those as, a way to kind of physically recover and then be ready to step on the floor. So, you bring it up too. They have the least of the games left in the NBA. Didn't know if you knew that. So that's pretty advantageous, especially when you look at the schedule down the stretch. It gets a little bit lighter. Now, again, don't take any of these teams lightly because they're all, searching and trying to get to the play and trying to get to the postseason. I did an article for basketballnews.com about the parity around the league right now. But the bottom tier teams, they're going to meet them a couple times. They've got a couple roads where they're going to play two, like those mini series types of things. I think one in Miami and one in Charlotte, I believe. So they're going to be on the road for a good bit of this. But again, those rest days, those are big time. You got to take advantage of them.
Yeah, it's nice that not only is the schedule light, I think it's one of the top 5 easiest schedules from the strength of schedule standpoint, but you do have more rest because you've played 4 or 5 games more than most teams. So from kind of a minute management standpoint, you would assume that, hey, if you take care of business and some of these teams that are at the bottom of their conferences, you do what you did when you were in Houston, you're going to actually be able to rest the starters for a lot of these games and keep yourself sharp for games that are going to be really significant in the standings. But I think what you noted about not taking any team lightly is really important, because not only did the plan expand the field of teams that are trying to remain competitive at this point, but you couple that with the new lottery odds, and there's just not the incentive to flat out suck the way that there used to be, right? Like Team Orlando is still going to be trying to build chemistry together and figure out what is and isn't working. Even Charlotte, now that Plumlee's gone, Mark Williams and developing chemistry with LaMelo Ball, like that is going to be so important. And LaMelo's playing great basketball. Like any of these teams can really go out and catch you at any given time. So I think it is really important that the Cavs don't take any of these teams lightly. And hopefully you learn some lessons from last season, right? Where even though there were a lot of injuries, there's still games like the Orlando one that will jump out and haunt you, right? Like if they just took care of business in that game, the season would have ended very differently in all likelihood.
Right. No, I completely agree with you on that one. And, taking teams lightly just can't do it. Can't do it in the NBA. Anyone can get you at any time. I mean, even in that 7-game winning streak that they had before they lost to Philly, like that Spurs game down the stretch, they were not happy with how they played. Still got the W, but like that's just a perfect example, I think, of even a team that's at the bottom of the barrel in the West, they still came to compete. There's guys out there trying to prove. There's guys trying to earn contracts. There's guys trying to earn spots and rotations. So those are things that you have to take into account when you play these games.
Mm-hmm. And probably the leader of taking this final stretch seriously is going to be Donovan Mitchell, right? He's probably going to make a All NBA for the first time this season. If he doesn't, I'm going to have a fair outrage podcast episode. So be warned, NBA. But I found it interesting because Donovan did struggle during that 3-game losing streak. He was shooting 41-29 from the floor, 26-63. Like he just really didn't look like himself the last 3 games. And I thought it was interesting that you get the report, I believe it's from Chris Fedor, saying that kind of the hours leading up to the Toronto game had a heart-to-heart with Mitchell and Donovan, a straightforward conversation. And Mitchell said, "I got you." And he came out and responded. And to me, it's just encouraging to see, when a coach does have that feel for the locker room and has that rapport between him and Mitchell. And I was even listening to Wine and Gold Talk podcast today where Fedor was talking about the respect that Donovan has for JB. As someone that's actually been around the team more than Carter and myself, can you speak to kind of the dynamics of that relationship and some of the impressions you've got, I guess, through 60-something games?
I mean, JB just raves about him almost after every game, and it's almost like ad nauseum. There's different ways that you can describe him, but first and foremost, it's always about the team. The saying for the Cavs this year is the team is the team. The strength of the team is the team. So, I mean, Donovan Mitchell is, embraced that. I mean, I've asked him a couple, questions from, Donovan at the end of games. You'll see him going and diving on the floor. You'll go see him going and grabbing rebounds against guys like Joel Embiid. Like those are plays that you don't typically see the quote unquote stars make because of the role players, right? But Donovan just does it all. Like, and even if he's not having a good shooting night, he's still engaged. He's still someone that's locking in on the defensive end, getting steals, finding teammates. He has such a good playmaking ability that we really don't, go appreciation for, because Darius Garland can do it so well. But Donovan, I mean, the attention he draws, and is able to make those pocket passes and is able to make the next pass or the the assist that lead, or the hockey assist that leads to the assist. The 3 assist thing. He's a ball mover. He is somebody who is not afraid to take the big shot. He's not afraid to break down a guy one-on-one. I think something that Nick Nurse said before Sunday's game was really cool. He was thinking about the combination of moves that he has and the balance he has to go with it. And I know we're getting kind of into the on-court part of it, but he's been able to find so many ways to create his own shot too, and that's something that he's done for a while. But he's got such an array of moves and an amazing balance, and the way that he's able to, make himself open, but also create for others. It's the total package. And I think just because, he has a little down January, he has a groin injury that kind of hampers him even when he is playing. You kind of forgot about the way that he started the season, which was ridiculous. He was in MVP talks the first, 2-3 weeks, maybe a month of the season, the way he was playing, the way he was shooting. But I think over time, he started to find that chemistry with these guys. That for Evan, that goes with playing off of DG, playing with DG off the ball, going off the ball when DG has the ball in his hands, finding Isaac the corner when guys shrink on him in the middle of the floor. Darius Garland even mentioned too, when Donovan's just sitting out there on the outside, guys are so drawn to him or have to pay attention to him that it opens up the pocket for Jared Allen, and it opens up, looks for guys in the corners and whatever it may be. So that right there, that's the kind of gravity that he carries with him. And, opposing coaches just so rave over him all the time coming into these situations and these games. So, the relationship with JV is obviously really good and really have a good rapport with each other. But, I mean, from my perspective, it just seems like everything's healthy up front. I think that to be a leader the way that Donovan's been a leader this year and only be 26 years old is pretty dang remarkable.
I was so impressed with how they set the tone early on against Toronto, and obviously it helps. You compare it to the last game they played in Toronto, where it was 4 games in 5 nights, and OG really kind of locked up Mitchell, if I'm not mistaken. I think the team was all kind of battling the flu at that time of year as well. Turns out rested Donovan Mitchell's a little harder to turn off his water, but at the same time, like that's a very physical team, and that's a type of defense given them problems in the past, right? And even though Fred VanVleet was out, and that obviously hurts Toronto's offense, all that means from a defensive standpoint is there's even more length, right? Like Scotty Barnes is on Darius Garland, Gary Trent Jr. On Donovan Mitchell, and OG on Donovan Mitchell. I think Gary was on Isaac, if I'm not mistaken. And for them to match Toronto's level of physicality early on in the game, and for them to be able to navigate kind of that physical perimeter defense, that trapping. I mean, part of the reason why Garland got up fewer threes than Mobley in that game was Toronto is so aggressive with how they blitz. Garland was able to kind of carve through that, battle through the physicality, get into the heart of the defense, and create shots for others. And I just thought it was a really, really impressive performance, and it coming against a team that's given them troubles. After they've lost to a team that's given them troubles in the past in Atlanta, it's encouraging. And I'm just curious to see now with 2 days off before this kind of marquee game against Boston, what type of preparation is going into that, and if they're able to come out and throw the first punch in that game in Boston, because that's going to be a really, really fascinating game.
It is. It is going to be a really fascinating game. I'm interested to see how the Celtics look at this one, because obviously we know what happened the first 2, and they were bangers, man. Let's be honest. Like, those were some really good games. Recall the Donovan Mitchell and Karras both going for 40 in the first one and coming out in an overtime win, and then the rematch in Cleveland. Only so far, before that it was great. It was a really fun game. And Jason Tatum's everything that every pundit will say about him. Like, he is the real deal. He is so fun to watch live. But I'm interested to see how Boston comes in this one, because it's almost similar to what the Cavs went through with the Raptors. Like that, I think is really interesting. That Toronto had the Cavs number, and then they lose that last game, right?
Mhm.
Boston's going to look to be doing the same thing in Cleveland.
Oh, for
So
sure. They're going to
who
have an
knows?
edge. Like there's
They are.
no way they're not going to have an edge and kind of try to put their best foot forward. I know right now they're down 14 to the Knicks at halftime. Looks like Jaylen Brown is out of the lineup, so we'll see what his availability is for that game. But I definitely expect him to come out because I mean, I don't think the tiebreaker is going to matter. Obviously, the Cavs can get a tiebreaker winning one of these two games against Boston, but from a Cleveland standpoint, and we've talked about this before, but there's just not a lot of opportunities from here on out to kind of get that marquee win down the stretch of the season, right? Like these next 5 games where you play Boston twice, you get a little break with Detroit, and then you play Miami twice. Outside of that stretch, it's really the Philly game, which is going to be kind of one of those tough rest situations where 3 games in 4 nights, Philly's going to have 2 days off. So that's going to be a tough test for the Cavs. But outside of that, like these games they're going to be rested for. It's going to be really important for the standings. And I tweeted this yesterday, but looking at like Boston twice, Miami twice, and Detroit, I'd be pretty happy with splitting both of the games against Boston and Miami and taking care of business with Detroit. Like if you can do better than that over this 5 game stretch, I'd be thrilled. But 3-2, I think I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Obviously every game's not going to go perfectly.
Yeah.
That's something that it just comes with the territory. But there, I mean, you want to definitely come out and again set the tone against the teams that you're battling with there in the top. I think the goal for them should just be finishing that top 4, right? I think you want to get that home court advantage. You don't want to lose it. And I think that you can probably stave off who's behind you right now, but things can flip. And we kind of touched on it earlier, but you just don't want to take any team lightly. And those teams that you do play you are battling for those spots, you're going to want to come out on top and do what you can to set yourself up well for the next level of the season, which is the playoffs.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, I sometimes like to give a little bit of advice for podcasters. And, if you're a podcaster and you're looking to come on top when it comes to video conferencing, you can do no better than going with Zoom. Support for this podcast and the message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Spencer, I want to dive a little deeper into kind of this 5 game stretch because, like I said, there's not going to be a lot of opportunities to kind of get some statement wins after this stretch. So it's really going to be kind of a telling time. And obviously, there's still a month and a half after it for the Cavs to get right and get their groove going into playoffs. As much as we like getting hot at the right time, and that's going to translate to the postseason. I remember the 2018 Cavs just blazing through the end of their season and then running into a wall of the Indiana Pacers and almost losing there. But when you're looking at this stretch, is there something that you're hoping to learn from Cavs from these performances beyond just the results? Like, is there kind of a point of emphasis or something that intrigues you with the Cavs might get revealed over these 2 weeks?
I would think you would just need to stick to their identity. And Darius brought that up in the post game after the win over Toronto, was that they played with their identity on that day, and that's getting stops and that's getting your offense going before the defense can get set. And I know that's probably cliche, but it is. It's what they do, man. I mean, you have 2 of the best defending big men in the league. I think that Darius and Donovan's defense has to get a little bit more credit too. But I mean, if you're down the floor before the opponent can really dig into what you're doing and you get into those actions quicker, you're going to have better results. And I think that their pace was a little bit higher against Toronto. I think that was something that seemed a little bit to me because they're usually a half-court team. But they were really trying to get up the floor after they were getting these stops, after they were getting, forcing these turnovers. And it looked pretty. It did. And I think that probably would be the biggest thing I'd be looking for over this stretch. But yeah, I mean, being consistent. that's the biggest thing I can say. And again, I know that it's kind of a lame duck answer, but I that's the biggest and best habit you can build going towards April. It's just you have to not have any more letdowns.
Hmm.
I'm sure that there probably will be one or two because
Odds
19
are
games,
that's
19
usually the way
games
the NBA
left.
goes.
Yeah, but they seemed really perturbed about Atlanta. They seemed really perturbed about the way that one shook out.
Good.
And
I mean, that's what I always say. Like sometimes when you see the backlash and people getting worked up after a game like that, they'll get oh, you got to hold these guys accountable. I'm like, first of all, none of them listen. No one hears what I say, and trust me, they care more about this than anybody watching, right? Like they're this is a prideful team. This is a team that wants to achieve something, that believes. They probably have higher expectations for themselves than even we do, right? Like so it doesn't surprise me to hear that the Atlanta game was received that way. And as much as it's cliche to say consistency, I really do think that is the key, because so many of these losses, it's been them getting away from what they do best. And not only did they get out and run after stops against Toronto, but they kept bigs involved early, right? Like Jared Allen was dominant. Jakob Pertl's presence really didn't deter he and Mobley from just going to work and getting to the rim. And you look at kind of this or I shouldn't say resurgence, but this step forward that Evan Mobley's taken over the last 25 games or so. When he's rolling, it opens up opportunities for everybody else. And that's another reason why I call like Toronto a blueprint game, because when all four are clicking, it becomes so hard for defenses to kind of identify one aspect of the team and shut that down. When Garland or Mitchell kind of get sticky fingers at the end of games and defenses are able to kind of hone in on them, or if one's out of the lineup, that becomes a little easier to defend. But when you got two big men that can be so explosive attacking the rim and finishing at the rim, they pass so well. You have two guards that can play so well on and off ball. When all four remain active and part of every single action and play that they're running and touching the ball, the Cavs really do become a hard team to defend, even though they're not some sort of a exceptional three-point shooting team at this point.
yeah, no, they're definitely not easy to defend when, especially. I mean, you got to bring up Evan Mobley's offense throws. It's just been it's incredible, man. He's taking the ball, up the floor himself now. Like he's actually going, grabbing these rebounds after getting a stop or getting a block and taking it himself. He's initiating it himself. He's hunting out mismatches when he doesn't have the ball. When he does have the ball, he's been more confident in taking shots. The jump hook, shooting corner threes. Now this is interesting because I asked JB that on Sunday, that he's been in the corners more, and we haven't seen much of that this year. But it feels like teams are going to start sagging off of him until he starts making them. So, he took 6 on Sunday and he made 2 of them. And it's not great, but the fact that he is comfortable enough taking that shot now, just because that would bring an entirely different element to the Cavs offense. He started, knocking those down at even a 35% clip or something like that. He's just been so dominant, and it's so good at sorting out those mismatches, and I mean taking the onus upon himself to just be just a monster. Like, yeah, that's the best way I can put it. Because again, we know what he brings on the defensive end, and the help defense is incredible, and the strides and all that. But when he's taking it himself, and Darius or Donovan doesn't touch the ball in transition, or there's a half-court position where he's demanding the ball, which he's gotten better at, according to both DG and Donovan, then you're in a place to where he could be the best person on that team night if he wanted to be. So, and that's a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Like, the funny thing is, you look at the Eastern Conference right now, and Boston, Milwaukee, and Philly, I think we'd all concede that they would have the best player in a series against the Cavs. Where the Cavs' advantage is how many Cavs players would you name after that before you get to a member of the other team, right? Like, is Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland able to outplay Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton or James Harden in a series? Or are they able to kind of match what LeBron is doing, and are the bigs more productive than any other player on Boston? Like that's kind of the sweet spot. It's not ideal to go into a series without the best player. It's not something that Cavs fans have done in decades going into a playoff series. It's just we always had a guy in LeBron James, but being able to do it, as I said, with an average age starting lineup of 23 and being competitive and having these guys step up, that's the most important thing. And keeping them all engaged and keeping them productive, I think that's the type of habits we need to build. And that's the type of habits that I'd like to see displayed in some of these tests. So playing in Boston, playing 2 games in Miami, and the 2 games in Brooklyn against a good defensive team that has a lot of length, right? Like these are all going to be interesting tests, and the defenses are going to be, especially getting to see the Cavs twice within the span of a week. You're probably actually going to see a little bit of game planning, right? Like that's what I love about these baseball series is teams are going to try to take some stuff away from the Cavs and try to get them away from their identity. So if Cleveland's able to make the adjustments to kind of respond to whatever pressure those teams are throwing at them, I think that would be a really encouraging sign going into the postseason, because that is absolutely going to be what we're going to see come playoff time.
And that's good experience too for JB. Like I think that's another initial part of this too, is, in those series, like see how they played you in the first game and then you make the necessary adjustments the next. I think, it's pretty simple. Another thing I wanted to bring up too, if you wanted to talk about new wrinkles in the offense, Jared Allen's made most of his money, being in the pocket and whatnot. But they are putting him on the baseline a little bit more too, because Evan's been in the pocket too. So kind of add another part of his effectiveness, being able to kind of use that different part of his skill set to teams and the inside. So look out for that as well. And I mean, there's other guys that are contributing as well. Like I think Karras is having probably his best stretch of the season, and you wouldn't know it by the box score. Like
it's wild. Like I've never would have expected to see Karis LeVert where I'm actually asking him to shoot more. Like when I'm watching on TV, I'm like, hey, you could be a little more aggressive here. You get your own shot, but he's really competing on defense. The playmaking's been really good. He's taking open threes when they're there. This isn't what I expect from Karis LeVert, but we've talked about it all year about the level of buy-in that he's had. And for him to kind of be that 6th man and not be a 6-man gunner, because that's not necessarily what the Cavs team needs when you have one of Garland and Mitchell on the court at all times. But to just be kind of another connecting piece and be that playmaker and someone that they can use to hack and destabilize defense when teams trap and hedge, that's really valuable. I would like just a little bit more shooting. Like I'd like to see him take the threes when they're available. Honestly, a lot of the role players I felt even passed up some open threes against Toronto. Overall, I agree with you. I think he's been really, really effective and helpful over the stretch.
Yeah, definitely. You brought up the word connector. That's perfect. The way that he's been able to find guys on dump offs to the drives to the rim, like Jarrett and him have just a. I
was about to say that baseline Jared Allen, right, in the dunker spot.
It's a perfect connection, and that goes back to their time in Brooklyn. He told me that. I actually interviewed it for BasketballNews.com before the All-Star break. But he, I think, has really, like you said, given this team somebody they can depend on to fulfill his role. And, that's not easy for someone, especially someone who's in a contract year. That's another sacrifice that we don't talk about with him. You brought up the turning down shots thing. That was interesting for me, seeing Dean Wade actually do that sometimes. And he still got quite a few up. But Dean's got to have a little bit more of a shot than he has had. His minutes has fluctuated a little bit too. I thought he did a really good job of bodying up guys on Toronto though in that game. I'm interested in this rotation. It's a little interesting to see how the minutes have been divvied up as of late. I think they're still looking, but they only played 8 guys against Toronto, which is interesting to me. I thought Isaac Okoro had a really solid stretch there in the third. He'd kind of been, up down since the break, just because he's been getting into some foul trouble a little bit early in games, and I think that he's kind of a rhythm player. But he was ready to go in that third quarter, give him 8 big points to respond to that Raptors run that cut it to 4. But that's pretty much going to be your rotation.
Yeah.
We just mentioned that the 3 other guys. We'll see what happens, what they do with Danny Green. I'm sure that they're going to try and integrate him as possible, but it's sounding like 8, 9 men the rest of the way. Also depending on injuries and what circumstances are, but I'm intrigued. I want to see which way they go because, I mean, JB said they're going to play him heavy minutes.
Yeah, and Jetty didn't play. He was, I don't believe, he was in the injury report against Toronto, but I know he was against Atlanta with back spasms. So I don't know if that's one of those you're available, but we better get you rest if we can do it. The Dean Wade thing is fascinating to me because not that JB said this, but with a lot of kind of the reporting around Kevin Love bio, it's Dean Wade's healthy and Kevin Love fell out of the rotation. And he was out of the rotation a little bit beforehand, but Dean just kind of most clear option to be that third big, right? Like he's very malleable with how you can play him. In the 2 matchups against Boston, he was really important. His defense on Jason Tatum. He's one of the kind of the better options that the Cavs have for those bigger wings. And I really think a lot of it does come down to him regaining that confidence in his shot, because coming into the Toronto game, I know he didn't shoot well against Toronto. We won a 7, including 1 of 5 from 3, but taking 7 shots is great because prior to that, he had only taken 20 shots in his previous 120 minutes. And like so often with JB, it does seem like a lot of the decisions in terms of rotation are based on cross, right? Like, I don't care if you're missing shots, if you're taking the right shots, right? And if you're playing your role and playing within our offensive and defensive systems. And for Wade to kind of regain a little bit of his confidence, I think would be really big over this stretch, because without him in the rotation, it is harder to kind of find rotations that do work when it comes to the big men. Like, I actually thought Lamar did a really good job against the Hawks, but in general, I don't think you'd want to go into games in the playoffs with Lamar as your third big, as much as I appreciate his contributions. I really do think that it's going to need to be Wade if the Cavs are going to have their best chance to compete in games.
Yeah, and that's inherently the gamble, like that. But they believe in him, and they've seen it work before. We know, the tracking on his data when he was starting last year and how good the team was when he was starting at the 3. Like
even this year, like all the lineup data, it remains great with him, but it's just coming off what seems to be a pretty serious shoulder injury. Just kind of regaining the confidence in that shot.
Yep. Nope. And you're right too. He's agile. He's younger. Can crash can crash the glass a little bit. And he stretches the floor. So like maybe he can get it a little bit more on attacking closeouts. Maybe he can use a couple of pump fakes. But again, I mean, it goes back to the core 4. The objective is to get it one of those 4. It's just clear as day. It's clear as day.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like you noting Allen kind of being in the dark spot a little bit more. I think Mobley's growth as a screen setter really helps. And then even now the new wrinkle is with Mobley in the corner, it does open up opportunities for the Isaac as screener in the pick and roll game, right? Like that small to small, trying to force a switch in those situations, because that is probably going to be really important. And I think it's important for the Cavs to be working on those kind of sets now, and Mobley getting comfortable with that, because we've seen it a lot. We're going to try to hide someone on Isaac Okoro. And given how much soft switching a lot of teams do nowadays, if you can have Isaac setting a screen for Darius or Donovan, and that means all of a sudden Trae Young is switched on to him, like that is a really advantageous position that you can put yourself in with just such a small wrinkle. So I think that that's kind of one of those things that JB's starting to lay the groundwork for, because obviously that's one of the bigger questions going into the postseason is, can Isaac work? Can basically any of the role players work, right? Like what combinations are going to work best for postseason basketball? And I don't think that that's something that you can just start to do when the playoffs come around. Like you have to kind of make use of these 2 months and get these guys familiar with those type of sets if you want it to be successful in the playoffs.
It's amazing how, a guard setting screens at the top of the key now. Like how different basketball's gotten. We're talking about a guy who's 6'4", coming in there and trying to force a switch for one of his mates who's also, in the same height, same, type of player. That's pretty crazy to me. But no, you're completely right. I mean, you add some new elements into the half court offense, especially because playoffs are mostly a half court game. Not going to see a lot of teams transition and getting whatever they want in those situations. It's going to be bogged down. That's why you have a Donovan Mitchell. That's why you have a Karis LeVert. That's why you have the screener game have with Evan and JA with Darius. Like those are. I think that's where the Cavs actually have an advantage because they played fast really all year. So they've kind of gotten used to those situations and scenarios. But yeah, I'm interested to see what other kind of things they can add into there. I will be on the lookout for Isaac on the screens, though. It's interesting. I did not notice that.
Yeah, they haven't done it a ton, but he has been used as a screener, particularly off ball more. But I know the game against Memphis was probably my favorite example of using him as a screener and getting Ja involved in all those sets. And even the first play against Atlanta automatically went to Isaac because Trae Young was on him, right? And even though he missed the layup there, Jared Allen was able to get the put back in that situation. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And as I said, one of those kind of wrinkles that can really translate to postseason basketball. But I'm curious with this 5-game stretch. We talked about what you're looking for, which is obviously consistency. What's your biggest concern for Cavs going into this 5-game stretch?
Concern, maybe with the heavy minutes that we were just talking about. You got to find guys who can contribute off the bench regularly. We haven't even mentioned Ricky Rubio yet. Hopefully he's healthy, and they've done a lot of rest management with him as of late.
He's been struggling. He's honestly been struggling. Like the Ricky minutes haven't felt as good as it did even early on, and that's part of the process. It's somewhat to be expected, but luckily it's kind of coincided with Karis LeVert really playing well as a playmaker. But Ricky's been in a bit of a funk recently, kind of quietly.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say probably just the bench, because you're gonna need to get these guys some leeway with the minutes. They can't be playing 37 every night leading up to the postseason. You don't want that. We already brought up the schedule and how it gets a little bit softer. I understand that, but there has to be a way to get some production off that bench. And I think it's going to start with Dean Wade. We know what Karis has been doing. I think Karis has been their most consistent bench player this season, but that's the area I think I would look for the most that needs improvement. I'm not gonna criticize their defense. There's been a lot of shot luck that hasn't gone their way this year. I know Atlanta was absolutely an anomaly.
That was just bad defense. That was just bad defense.
That was just bad defense. But you just look at the way everything else is going. Like they are contesting shots. They are sticking to the game plan. I know people, if you want to go back to the Denver game, they're like, oh, why are you doubling Nikola Jokic? I don't know, because Nikola Jokic. So that's why this guy's open, because there's other, weapons on that team. But I think it's the identity that you want to have moving forward is what you've been doing all season long, and why they have a top defense in the NBA is because they've been contesting shots like crazy. They've been helping the helper. They've been doing a good job of stopping penetration for the most part, and forcing a lot of ball swing of the arc. Not a lot of teams are having a lot of luck in the paint against these guys, and for good reason. But concern wise, I would say definitely the bench and maybe trying to get them involved a little bit more, especially with the teams you're playing.
I think my biggest concern is basically what they're going to do with some of these big wings that they play, right? Whether it's Jason Tatum or Jimmy Butler. Yeah. As I mentioned in the past, that was kind of Dean Wade's responsibility, right? And with him not necessarily being in a groove right now, kind of feels like if that's not working and if they don't have confidence in giving him minutes at this time, how they go about defending those guys, I think is going to be the most fascinating, because that's part of the equation with the Love buyout, right? Like you look at the two play-in games that they played last year, Kevin Love, they weren't able against Atlanta and basically stopped playing him after the first half in Brooklyn. So um, we were discussing after the buyout whether it's a vote of confidence or if it's a test for everyone else. And I think kind of the consensus that we had was it's a test, right? Like if these other options don't work, we need to figure out what does and doesn't work, right? Like we it's kind of better to go with what you anticipate to be that postseason rotation and kind of throw these guys to the fire and see who rises to the occasion, build up some chemistry there, rather than going to options that you don't feel as confident will translate to the postseason. So how Dean Wade does against Jason Tatum and against Jimmy Butler, able to kind of find a bit of a groove on offense, like to me that's my biggest concern, because the other stuff about like keeping everybody involved and the balance between the core four, like that's going to be a question, but at the same time that's something that over the course of the season they've done a really really damn good job. Like every single combination of those four with one on or off the lineup seems to really work. Like the fact that Garland and Mitchell together have a plus 7.5 net rating, Garland with no Mitchell plus 6.6, Mitchell with no Garland plus 4.9, like all of those net ratings would be top 3 in the NBA. Like this team rocks in every single combination. It's about finding the role players and the contributors outside of that core four that can really kind of accentuate and absorb some of those minutes defending other stars. So that would probably be my biggest concern heading into this stretch. But it's, like I said, it's a really awesome opportunity. Like you're only playing 2 games this week. You get the palate cleanser with Detroit, where you can maybe try out some stuff that did and didn't work out in that first Boston game, and then you host Boston again, and you head to Miami. Like this is going to be some really really fascinating basketball.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird not being in the arena like every night. Like I feel like like there was a stretch, man, in like I think it was December where they had so many home games. I think it was a 6 or 7 game homestand, and I was there the whole way. I was so like didn't know what time it was, could cook dinner and all that stuff. So like seeing 2 games in 7 days is interesting, especially the way that the schedule has been this year. So it's a little different, but I'm sure that they are really take advantage of this and heal some of those bumps and bruises.
Well, I want to take advantage of a little bit of your time around the team. What has kind of your biggest surprise been this season, just being around this Cavs team?
Oh, my biggest surprise in what sense?
Like just something that in either direction, like that you didn't necessarily expect. Either was preconceived notions of what this team was going to be, or how well something's gelled, or how poorly something's gone. Either direction, wherever you want to go.
I can old takes expose myself.
Yeah,
I had
go
no
for it.
idea. I had no idea Donovan was as strong as he was. He is a running back, man. He is a running back. Like I mean, we talk about the cavalcade of moves, but like just the brute strength with his shoulder that he can use to just go through guys. I think I really underestimated that. His balance, and I've asked him this before. Just the way that he's worked in the past with Quinn Snyder and Johnny Bryant, who's obviously with the Knicks now, so cue all that speculation. But he was who taught him in Utah about doing these drills and working on his footwork, working on his balance. He's just really amazing, amazing at his craft. He is just when you watch him, it's like he can just step in to 30 and you look up and you're like, what? Like I think I tweeted that on Saturday. I was like, or on Sunday, I was like, I looked down, he had 25, I looked up, he had 35. I'm like, where did this come from? What happened? Obviously he hit 8 threes in that game, but it's not even the 3 making for me. It's the strength, and it's the way that he can create separation. Some of these dribble moves, I did not watch enough Jazz basketball, I guess. And that's that's on me. But he is
It's also on just the West Coast. Like staying up late is difficult.
I can't make that excuse though, because the Northwest Division is my favorite in basketball. But And I did, watch some Donovan there, but like there's something about the way that he goes about getting buckets that just I did not know that he was that capable of that. And again,
Mhm.
that's on me.
Yeah, that's fair. Before we get you out of here, I'll let you get a take in on what the Cavs should do with their last roster spot. Do you have any strong feelings there?
Well, you lost a big, right? So you need a 4/5, or do you? Because I mean, you have Rolo in the house.
Yeah.
So it didn't really make sense for them to bring in someone like, for example, Nerlens Noel just bought out today, right?
He's probably going to want somewhere with playing time. Like that. That
Agreed.
would be my expectation.
Agreed. Yeah. So I mean, do you look on the buyout market? Do you promote someone like Isaiah Mobley, who's been doing really well with the charge?
Yeah.
Sam Merrill thing. It's a good question. I don't know what they should do with it because the last roster spot, as we've seen, like even the 10th, 11th guy isn't getting playing time. You do want that depth. I'm interested to see what happens with Danny Green. Like I said, with the rotation, I want to see if they're going to implement him as a regular player or if they're going to use him in spot situations. I don't know. There's some guys on the buyout market. I get a name that I saw. This is not a report. Please do not aggregate this.
Aggregate it. Help promote the podcast by taking him out of context right now.
If you want to go for the shooting angle, Nemanja Bjelica, I think makes a lot of sense.
I have not thought of that at all.
I'm just
and I pride myself as someone that's like way into kind of like examining every possible option. That was not that I was expecting at all. I was expecting Boogie Cousins before that name.
I was that. Well, again, they have Rolo at the 5, so it's like,
yeah, I know.
It's like you don't really see too many out there. Like, Carmelo's a free agent, right? Do you want to bring in someone?
Yes.
Like that? Like,
no. Here's the thing. I talked about this actually in our Discord. It's a shame that all the nights with the LAN jerseys are over because the Carmelo Anthony, the LAN jersey would be like a Coachella S tier jersey that I would have to get that one.
Right, of course. Will Barton's out there, but again, do you want to fill up your guard room? Like, I think they trust Ricky Rubio. I think they trust Raul Neto. I think they trust a lot of the vets that they do have. I think they trust them come postseason time, and we're running out of time. There's again only less than 20 minutes to integrate someone into a rotation. You can see how
20 minutes. Oh my God.
Yeah, 20 minutes left in the season. I'm all over the place, but no, like you can see how difficult it is to integrate someone into a rotation just simply by looking at what's going on with Danny right now. Like he's only played I think two games, like, and he's barely played. Like, and if you add another body into that just complicates matters further. So I think go with what they got. Maybe the last roster spot does get converted to a contract or something like that. That'd probably make the most sense. But yeah, no, I think that they just stick with what they have, to be honest. But yeah, I'm glad that Bjelica caught you off guard. I didn't know you would do that. But, you just think about stretch 4, and that's kind of what they need. So.
Yeah, I think my preference is honestly just kind of like sign Diakite to an NBA deal, promote someone from within, like even Sharif Cooper, right? Get him on a two-way before some other team scoops him up. And
someone will. Someone will.
Right, and if Raul Neto moves on in the offseason, then maybe he can be your third guard. Right, you never know. So maybe that's the way you go, or maybe Sam Merrill, as you said, right? Like he's played well. Isaiah Mobley, I'd be a little surprised just from a team control standpoint. I think keeping him on the two-way when he hasn't had a lot of games up with the Cavs. Team always try to play that out to maximize team control and all those little rules. So I'm interested to see where they go with it, but maybe they do feel that there's a need for a veteran that if you are in a pinch, if there is foul trouble, someone that you can call in and give you 4 or 5 minutes.
The proverbial Dante Jones, like
exactly right. Rack up some fines. Do you want to give any bold predictions for how we're going to do over this 5-game stretch? What would be success in your eyes over these 5 games?
I think what you said, 3-2. I mean, you play the Celtics twice, you play the Pistons this weekend, you can't lose to the Pistons. That'd be very bad.
Do not do that. They are not good right now.
Do not want to do that right now, especially the state of that squad. And then you have the next in Miami. You're going to want at least one of those. You want
Yep.
at least one of those. So yeah, 3-2 I think would be successful in that situation. But I mean, shoot, that's tough. I mean, you get Boston twice, you get Miami twice. That's not easy, especially knowing that the Heat themselves, that we just talked about Kevin Love. You know, he's having a pretty decent game tonight against Philly, and
Yeah, they just beat Philly, so the Cavs are now 2 games back a third.
There you go. See, it happens live. And you have, you know, they picked up. I thought, you know, Cody Zeller was a nice little shrewd pickup by them too. So, you know, they have a roster full of vets and they're hungry and they're trying to really finish the season strong. And then we just talked about Boston, man. I mean, they are really good, especially, you know, you have Mark Marpeck, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, some of the additions. I love Malcolm Brogdon so much. He's a great player. Grant Williams, amazing role player. Robert Williams is tough. Like these are hard teams to beat, guys. These are hard teams to beat. So I think if you split with those two, you beat Detroit. That I think would be a good situation for them.
Oh, and speaking of breaking news, I'm going to break our producer Matt Gold's heart right now. Just the notification that LaMelo Ball suffered a fracture in his right ankle in tonight's game against Detroit. So LaMelo Ball super fan Matt Gold is heartbroken right now. So
that sucks, man.
That really does suck. He was playing fantastic, and I was also hoping for some Mark Williams in my fantasy playoff, and that's going to hurt that as well. So that's a little bit of devastating news. But hey, the Cavs are a little closer to the 3 seed, and honestly, if they have a winning record for this 5 stand, they stay in the mix, right? Because Philly's got, this is the real tough part of the season for Miami, for Philly, for Brooklyn, even for New York. You look at all those teams and what these 2 weeks are going to be, and this is probably going to determine kind of what your range of finishing is going to be. So if they go 4-1, I'm going to get a little obnoxious. But
don't get greedy. Don't get greedy now.
Oh, I'm always, you know that. But you know, 3-2, I will absolutely take it. Spencer, thank you so much for coming on. Basketballnews.com. Make sure you guys are checking out. You guys do a ton of great work there. Keep it 94 podcast. I really enjoy it as well. Spencer, do you want to plug anything you got coming up for the listeners to know?
Coming up, you're going to laugh at this, actually. I have a feature coming up on Scotty Barnes, the Raptors. And yes, I know he is the stubborn enemy of Cavs Nation. But
no, it's okay. You gotta promote some of these guys that haven't made it, like Evan Mobley has.
Oh, see, the backhanded compliment. But no, I did talk to Scotty Barnes about basically responding to being a Rookie of the Year. So that'll come out this week. I did a couple. I did like 3 features last week, but the one that I was really proud of was Dominic Barlow, the Spurs. He's the first ever overtime elite alum to make it to the NBA and play. So definitely check that out. The Karis LeVert interview is still holding up. So please check that out. It
was fantastic. We plugged it on a previous episode, but make sure you guys are checking that out if you haven't already.
I appreciate that. And then I had a wide ranging one too on NBA parody, as I mentioned. Talked to a lot of players from the Heat, talked to different coaches that came in, just about why the league's so competitive this year. And they had answers regarding the play-in, but there were a couple of other ones too that were kind of fascinating to me. So definitely check that out. I am at Spin Davies on Twitter, at Spin Davies on Instagram. And keep it at 94. Subscribe, rate, review, and please interact with me on Twitter. If you already don't, I'm trying to be better. I don't really like tweeting because I don't like Twitter, but I'm trying to get back to my old ways, you know. So.
Well, you know, it can be a little trying at times, but you know, I'm trying to keep it in the right headspace as well, because you know, it's so stupid because 80% of the interactions are great, and it's like the few that are negative just outweigh it, and that shouldn't be the mindset, but that's just the way we're wired. But you know, honestly, all the feedback that we get, all love for the podcast is really appreciated. Really appreciate everyone tuning in live on YouTube right now. Make sure you like and subscribe, click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.